Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Friday SLO talk. I am Enrique Jauregui, the SLO coordinator for Fresno State College. As you are coming in, kindly introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us where you're from. How's the weather? Today, I'm accompanied by esteemed members of the California Outcomes and Assessment Coordinators Hub, who will introduce themselves shortly. But some housekeeping items. Please ensure your microphone remains muted unless you're contributing or asking a question. Feel free to utilize the chat feature in Zoom for questions and comments. Shortly, a Padlet link will be shared in the chat, offering another space to share insights. By Sunday night, you can access the recordings of this session on the course's website, where links are to presentations and other resources will also be available on the blog. Now I'd like to recognize the coaches who will assist in moderating today's discussion. Jarek, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Jarek. I'm the founder of Friday SLO Talks, and it's just a pleasure to see you all today this morning. Amanda, you next.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good morning. I'm Amanda Tainter. I'm the faculty coordinator of instructional design and outcomes at Reedley College in the Central Valley of California. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Any other coaches, Jarek or Amanda?
No, I don't see anybody else.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, coaches. Thank you. Today we are excited to introduce Dr. Karen Singer-Freeman, who will lead us through the pioneering efforts of the Grand Challenges in Assessment project. This initiative is at the forefront of reshaping national educational assessment strategies. In this session, she will not only outline the project, but also share practical AI-powered strategies for campus leaders and assessment professionals to enhance learning, promote equity, and make evidence-based decisions in their institutions. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Karen Singer-Freeman. Take it away, Dr. Karen. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
There we go. Sorry, for some reason my unmute button was not working. Oh, there we go. That's why. Okay, well, I'm so excited to be here today and really appreciate the invitation because AI and Grand Challenges just work so beautifully together. And I know those of us in the project have been very excited to sort of think about how AI can help us move things forward. And so my plan for today is I'm going to give you an overview of the Grand Challenges project. I'll be pretty brief there, but I'd be happy to follow up if anybody has questions. And there's some links at the end if you want to be on our mailing list or get more information. But I'm really going to focus most of my time on thinking about these three challenges which the assessment community identified as being important and problematic, and ways that tomorrow you could start working with them on your campus with your faculty to make small improvements using ChatGPT. So the project, this is our mission. Basically, we are like many other Grand Challenges projects in other fields, but it's our goal to organize the national community to make progress towards these challenges which were identified by the community, both through national strategic plans, which are linked as we move through the project, and in addition to the national tactics, we have local tactics. And so everything I'm talking about today will be really focused on those local tactics. And when we are successful, we will be empowering higher education professionals to develop and use assessment in ways that support innovation, learning improvement, and equity. And those are the core three challenges. So here the challenges are. The first challenge that by far was viewed as the most important by our community about 4 years ago was the idea that we need to shift from using assessment for compliance to actually thinking about ways to make sure that we are assessing equitably and using assessment to drive increased and improved equity in higher education. The second challenge is, and this is so close to ChatGPT and artificial intelligence's heart, but it's the idea that we need to speed up our loop closing. So learning improvement over time is really important, but increasingly there's rich data that faculty can make use of within the space of a single course to improve their pedagogy so that it's more adaptive to the students in their class. And that's what this challenge is about. And then our third challenge is really kind of 3 challenges in one. But if we want to make sure that assessment is driving innovation and improvement in higher education, we need to make our assessment findings more actionable by improving them. We need to make them more visible by making sure that we communicate them to non-expert audiences effectively. And we need to make sure that those assessments, once improved, are the center of integrated planning that drives improvement over time. So how about using ChatGPT? I just want to start out with sort of my thoughts about where ChatGPT is good and where it is bad. And I am sorry that there's a phone ringing in the background. I can't do anything about that, I'm afraid. So I find that ChatGPT is really great at taking content you provide. So you provide the facts and then applying a model style or voice. So if we think about ourselves as assessment practitioners, oftentimes we're meeting with faculty or department chairs and saying, hey, you know, in this assessment report, it would be really great if you could change your goals to be a little smarter. And this is what I mean by smart. And ChatGPT can do that for faculty. So they can help, it can help us give that feedback to faculty, but it also can immediately help you or faculty improve by giving feedback on a written piece of work. It's also really great at giving feedback from another perspective. So we talk a lot about making sure that all of our stakeholders are included, and you can ask ChatGPT, would this be understandable by a typical first-year student or a typical parent in my institution? And ChatGPT can tell you where there's potentially flaws in your communication and make suggestions for improvement. It's also really great at responding to clarifying requests. So when I talk to people who are frustrated with ChatGPT, they often think it's a one and done. You know, they'll put a request into ChatGPT and then they'll get a response back and they won't like it and they'll say it's not so good. For the most part, ChatGPT improves quite a bit if you just keep saying, well, make this more concise, put this in the student voice. I'm not sure you're really doing this thing I asked. And each time you make that request, it will make revisions in response to you. So when using ChatGPT, I think it's really important to think of it as a conversation rather than like an input-output. Things to watch out, the fatal flaws of ChatGPT, which I'm sure many of you have already heard about, but I would be remiss not to mention them here, is it has what they call hallucinations. So ChatGPT makes stuff up. And that's why I say it's really important for you to provide the content, right? You don't want to ask ChatGPT for a list of sources and trust that those sources exist, because we know often they don't. If you ask ChatGPT to apply an existing model, and I'm going to give some examples of that later in the session, it will take that model as long as the model's available on the internet or you supply it and apply it. But if you ask it for facts about the world, it will be right sometime and wrong sometime. The second, and I think in some ways even more serious problem, is ChatGPT and other natural language processing models amplifies whatever bias or text it was trained on. So it's in secondary revisions and tertiary revisions, it's getting better, but ChatGPT will reflect biases that are present in the written materials that it read. And so it's important for you to make sure that if you're generally getting ChatGPT feedback and not particularly asking it to review something for bias, that you're not inadvertently amplifying bias that might already be present in our society. And it will do the same thing for common assessment problems. So it's read lots of student learning outcomes, and it's actually pretty good at generating student learning outcomes. But what I've found is if I ask it to generate a student learning outcome, it oftentimes uses a lot of jargon that wouldn't be very accessible to students. And that's one of those moments where it's replicating a problem that I think exists in the assessment field. If you ask it to simplify it or rephrase it in language a student would understand, it's very good at that. But this is a moment where you need to use your wisdom as an assessment professional and not just rely on what it gives you in the first moment. Okay, so now the grand challenges and how ChatGPT can help. And all of the examples I'm sharing today came from ChatGPT 3.5, I think it is. It's the free one. So there's ChatGPT 4, which I've heard is better, but I don't have an account. And so the things I'm showing you here come directly from that. There are some instances where I've edited for brevity just so that I could fit it on the page. So the equity plan has two primary objectives. The first is to promote existing and create new equitable assessment practices. I'm sorry, there's three. The second is to create professional development that supports the use of equitable assessment. And the third is to engage with existing structures like accrediting organizations to increase structural supports for equity in higher education. And when thinking about local tactics, I'm really going to focus on this second one here of ways you can use ChatGPT to support professional development to increase the equity of assessment. So the first thing that ChatGPT is quite good at is editing communications to improve the extent to which they use inclusive language. So I said that ChatGPT has this problem where it can magnify inequities and bias in society. But if you explicitly ask it to do something like use inclusive language or avoid a deficit perspective, it actually knows what that is and it can do that. So this is something that I took from a real program review where the faculty was talking about trends in enrollment as part of their planning process in their academic program review. And I've made in pink letters the language that, you know, if we had time on a workshop, I'd make you think about this. But this is where I think there might be a problem. So demographic forecasts indicate a larger proportion of Hispanic students and declining numbers of Caucasian students. Lower college going and retention rates of Hispanic and other minority student groups will require innovative recruitment activities, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, in my role previously as working with departments around program reviews, I could ask a faculty member to think about revising this to use more inclusive and less deficit-based language. But ChatGPT can do a really good job of that as well. So I put this into ChatGPT with the prompt revise to use inclusive and non-deficit language. And you can see how it's changed. And I put in white what I view as some of the key changes it made. So rather than saying more Hispanic and fewer Caucasian, it now is saying a more diverse population with increased representation of Hispanic students. So that's the non-deficit view there. And then it's using this inclusive language rather than sort of the implication being that Hispanic students are needy and problematic and singled out. Now it's rephrased to support all students. And this idea of inclusive recruitment strategies as opposed to strategies targeting Hispanic students, and a more equitable and inclusive environment. So that just gives you an idea. If you're thinking about professional development with faculty, if you shared this kind of thing with them, then a lot of faculty really do care about using inclusive language, and they can potentially do this before turning in something like a program review. ChatGPT is also great at identifying possible problematic areas in SLOs. It's also good at generating SLOs. I'll be showing you a fair amount about that. So here's an SLO, demonstrate measurable improvement in interpersonal communication and public speaking skills with a focus on clear articulation and empathetic listening. Just as a by the by, ChatGPT generated this for me when I asked it to generate a student learning outcome for communication. So it's not a bad one. But then I asked it to tell me if there were any problems with possible bias. And so this is what ChatGPT told me. Appears to be fairly unbiased. but there's a potential for bias in the term empathetic listening, which could favor certain communication styles or cultural norms. So then I said, okay, well, what do we do about it? Actually, no, it even told me what to do about it. To mitigate the potential bias, you could, and it gave me this, provide specific criteria for assessing empathetic listening that emphasizes the importance of respecting diverse perspectives and avoiding favoritism. And so then I said, could you give me a rubric that could be used to evaluate that? And it actually provided a fully fleshed out rubric with 4 different, ranging from excellent to, I think, not approaching or absent. But this just shows you the sort of top of it. And so we've done work with faculty in a course design institute at Wake Forest, where we've gotten them to think about their SLOs with ChatGPT as a partner. And that conversation faculty have found really wonderful, because you can ask it everything, right? Is it inclusive? Is it, later on I'll be showing you, is it smart? So things like that. We can also really benefit from using ChatGPT to revise things to encourage a growth mindset. So there's a lot of syllabus workshops around increasing students' sense of belonging or growth mindset through instructions and syllabus creation. Here, this was the grading section from a syllabus from a faculty member I was working with. It's nothing special, but I gave that to ChatGPT and asked it to modify it to encourage a growth mindset in students, and it changed it to this. And so what you'll see here is really what it's doing is just adding a purpose, which we know is very helpful for students for each type of assignment. So it's going to increase their understanding of the faculty member's intention and the value of the assignments. And then it's also putting it in the perspective that this is a developing ability. So to help you grow and learn, to enhance your comprehension and enforce your learning. And then notice this announced and unannounced under the quizzes is still there, both announced and unannounced, but now there's a purpose there to encourage consistent practice. So that shifts it away from being maybe seen as very punitive by students to at least contextualizing it, that I'm doing this with the goal of helping you grow and learn. And I see somebody mentioning the TILT framework. Absolutely. I think my next slide might be on TILT, but this is very much aligned with the TILT framework. So we can also ask it to edit paragraphs of a syllabus to support sense of belonging. One thing just to mention is you can't give limitless text to ChatGPT, and I found the thing that works best is to go paragraph by paragraph within a syllabus. If you try and do a whole syllabus, it's harder to have that conversation that gets it moving to the place you want it to go. But here were 2 policies, again, from a syllabus from a faculty member I worked with. On-time attendance at all classes is expected, and my office hours are blah, 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 right? Nothing terrible here, but I gave it to ChatGPT with the prompt of help increase the extent to which this would support students' sense of belonging. And once again, we see this sort of TILT application. I value your active participation and encourage on-time attendance at all classes to create a supportive learning environment. So it's taking the same information, but just making it warm and fuzzy. And then I'll let you read what the office hours piece says. But really the key thing is the office hours are now sandwiched into an invitation that the faculty member wants the student to come and is there to help them and wants to help them. And again, this is the kind of thing that lots of people in my office work with faculty to do. But the thing that's beautiful about it is faculty can now get that feedback at 2 in the morning, the night before classes, as they're working on their syllabus, if they know that it's there. So now the second of our threads, which you will see is actually co-chaired by Jarek and Janio, 2 of our presenters today, and Jessica Taylor, who I don't think is here, is this idea of increasing the use of assessment for rapid improvements in pedagogy. So improvements in the space of a single semester, not spanned over multiple semesters. And just while I'm on this slide, you'll see that pedagogy is underlined here. If you access the slides and click the link for each of these 3 slides that have that underlined word, it'll take you to the full strategic plan where you can sort of see everything that we're doing. So there's 2 objectives this team is working on. The first one is we have to do a better job of measuring learning over time, so that we can, see those changes or the absence of improvements within that single class and respond to it. And then once we figure out how to do that, we have to figure out how we use that information to make rapid and equitable improvements in our teaching. And so the first thing that I think is really great, and this came up in the chat earlier, is encouraging faculty to put in full assignments and ask ChatGPT to apply the TILT model. And you don't even have, it stands for Transparency in Learning and Teaching. And it's Mary Ann Winkelm's, and I'm not sure if I said her name right, so I apologize if I didn't. But you don't have to even spell it out. ChatGPT knows what the TILT model is, and it's really good at applying it. So here, this is just a very small reflective writing assignment. Describe your goals for calculus and your motivations for each goal, and with a brief statement describing steps you will take to meet your goals. Not a bad instruction, right? It's pretty clear, but you give it to ChatGPT and it's going to add the purpose of the assignment. So the purpose of this assignment is to reflect on why you've set your goals. Understanding your motivations is a crucial aspect of goal setting and can increase your commitment and engagement in the course, right? So it's saying this is good for you and this is why. Then it has what was in it before. But then another key element of the TILT model is to give students detailed instructions about what to do and actually what not to do. So it breaks it out. To describe your goals and the motivations behind each goal. To support your goals, do the following. Explain the reasons behind each goal. Why did you set this particular goal? And there's a typo there. Bad ChatGPT. Describe the specific actions you plan to take to accomplish your goal. Name individuals or resource sources on or off campus that you will reach out to for support. And so this is actually increases equity as well as improving student performance, because you're getting rid of differences in students' previous knowledge of how to approach a reflective writing assignment by providing these more detailed instructions. And then if you want to click this link, somebody in my office actually has a full biology assignment that was modified by ChatGPT using these TILT instructions. And so when you get the slides, you can see a bigger assignment here. I see a question. Does the objective of improving measurement student learning over time only include quantitative? No, absolutely. So measuring student learning over time definitely includes qualitative, and a key sort of piece of that thread is thinking about things like reflective writing, e-portfolios, student views of their learning. Okay, so you can also ask ChatGPT to apply culturally responsive pedagogy, which actually sort of includes a large number of different tactics. And so this is helpful, but oftentimes ChatGPT will apply one or another principle, so it can be better to sort of pick specific culturally responsive principles. But I'll just sort of show you how this could work. So this was from a statistics class. And again, if you read over the instructions, they aren't bad, right? Please work on in-class examples before attempting this lab. So it's got that TILT thing of telling you what to do first. Read questions carefully before answering them. Satisfactory completion requires 100% attempts on questions and 60% accuracy. So it's got sort of a flexible, it's saying you have to try everything, but that's kind of growth mindset-y. You can attempt it up to 3 times. The time between each attempt is 15 minutes. So go back and read about the concepts that aren't clear to you. Again, that TILT model is there. And the best out of 3 attempts will be considered for grading. So that's sort of a growth mindset approach. But when asked to edit to make it more culturally responsive, you can see here, to ensure success, do this, right? So that's saying that the professor has confidence in the student's ability to succeed. And by reviewing in-class examples, it's going to make you familiar with the content and build your confidence. So it's sort of talking about that self-efficacy piece there. Read each question carefully before responding to help you succeed. For successful completion, try to answer all of the questions and get at least 60% of the answers right. So, you know, if I was going to do a second round on ChatGPT here, actually, I should finish it first. And then this is the one new addition, this bottom bullet. If you need additional support, please reach out and we'll work together to ensure your success. So if I was going to send this back for a second round of revision, I might say revise to have less repetition of student success and include more alternate forms of culturally responsive pedagogy. And I'm sure it would even generate a nicer one next. Okay. So then I told you we were going to come back to SLOs. One way to improve pedagogy is to increase the extent to which your SLOs are accessible to students, so they actually understand what it is you're trying to teach them, and smart. So here is another SLO that ChatGPT generated for me when I asked it to generate an SLO to measure interdisciplinary knowledge and I think applied learning. And so then if you read that over, it's got a lot of highfalutin language that a lot of students would just be like word, 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 and not really know what you wanted. So I asked it to revise it into simple language that all students would understand. And it changed to use what you're learning from different subjects to solve real world problems and understand things in a broader way. So that's much better. You know, I still have a problem with this SLO because it's double barreled. So the assessment person in me doesn't like that. So I might pull this out into two, but we'll leave it for now. Then I took the same revised SLO and I said, now make it smart. So SMART refers to specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And you can see that now it's really fleshed it out so that it would lead a faculty member to a pretty good assessment plan for it. And you know, another thing to say here is ChatGPT can't read minds. So I think another place that it can be really valuable in something like this is if you look at measurable or achievable, it's not telling you how many, because that's for the faculty member to determine. And whether it's, you know, when a faculty member looks at this, they might be like, oh, well, students in my class aren't actually addressing real world problems anywhere. So that might make them either revise what's measured or revise the learning outcome. So the dialectic process where ChatGPT sort of fills something out the way it imagines you were thinking and gets it wrong can also really be useful in professional development with faculty. ChatGPT is also great at simplifying test questions. And I want to add one of my favorite cautions here, which is it's terrible at making test questions harder. So please don't ask it to take a test question and make it harder, because what it does there is it oftentimes will make it more grammatically complex or the vocabulary at a higher level. And what that actually does is make it more equitable. It doesn't usually make it conceptually more difficult. But so here is a test question, which once again, I actually had ChatGPT generate a question. So this was the first question it generated on data triangulation. And so I picked that topic for this workshop because I figured assessment folks probably know what data triangulation is. But in a nutshell, data triangulation is where you use more than one type of data, oftentimes direct and indirect or qualitative and quantitative, to measure the same thing in order to get a more robust understanding of what's being measured. And I'm not going to read this all now because I want to make sure we have some time for discussion. But if you look it over yourself, you'll see that it's using very high level vocabulary, which may or may not have been taught in the course. And it's also has a ton of words that aren't really relevant to the conceptual issue at hand. So that original question is going to privilege students who are fast readers, have a large vocabulary, maybe have more background in experimental design, because it's using words like validity, which may or may not have been taught in the course. And what ChatGPT did for me when I asked it to simplify was really, it got rid of all the extra words, but kept the same sort of core abilities. And again, whether this is right, you know, you might be a faculty member who really cares that students know about validity, and then you'd want to put that back in. But when a faculty member plays around like this, it allows them to see what could be, right? And to see that maybe all those extra words aren't something they really need in that question. So finally, our third challenge, and we're doing pretty well for time here. Do I need to stop and answer any questions before I move into this? I've been barreling forward.
We are just listening to you, Karen. This is a lot of really very useful, very insightful information. I'm just yes, taking it all.
Well, feel free to interrupt me. I'm trying to sort of keep an eye on the chat, but I'm not sure that I'm always successful.
You're good. Thank you.
Okay, so our final thread is this idea of making assessment findings actionable, visible, and driving innovation. And we have 5 co-chairs of this team, which you can see on the screen here. So the first objective is advancing innovative approaches to institutional excellence. So that's really focused on integrated planning. The second is to advancing innovative approaches to making assessment findings actionable. And the third is making them visible. And by visible, we don't just mean that you can see them in a graph or a figure, but we also mean that you can understand them if they're written in a report. So, I have a typo on that slide, my apologies. One really important ways to to improve assessment findings and make them more actionable is to start to include implementation fidelity questions in our SLO reporting or other assessments of initiatives in higher education. And in a nutshell, implementation fidelity is this idea that we all have great plans for what we're going to do, but there's oftentimes quite a bit of daylight between what we plan and what we actually accomplish. And in traditional assessment reports, we don't actually ask faculty what went wrong. And so ChatGPT knows about implementation fidelity. And when I asked ChatGPT to suggest an implementation fidelity question that could be used on SLO reporting, it gave me these. Was the instructional plan for achieving this SLO followed consistently and as intended? That would be an early question. And then a later question, please describe how implementation fidelity impacted your findings. Consider how closely the original instructional plan was followed and whether any variations might have influenced the outcomes. Now, this was ChatGPT's first draft of these. I might have asked it to simplify that second one to avoid using the term implementation fidelity, because if faculty don't know what that is, it wouldn't communicate effectively with them. You can also ask ChatGPT to suggest a prompt for SLO reporting that encourages a focus on promising failures. So one of the sort of threads that making assessment findings actionable has been working on is to break the cycle in higher education where we feel like assessment is a judgment of us. And so we're being judged if our students don't succeed, and to encourage this idea of exploring promising failures. So to really be rewarded for focusing on what went wrong and what we can improve. Because if we really want to start driving improvement, we have to get away from saying, I did it all right, I'm good, to saying, you know, this is what I could do better. And so when I asked ChatGPT to suggest a prompt that you could put on SLO reporting to get at that, it gave me this. Reflect on instances where the implementation of the SLO fell short of the desired outcomes. Describe what was learned from these experiences and how they could inform future strategies. I also then thought, oftentimes in my previous office, we'd have thousands of assessment reports coming in and we needed to give feedback on them. So I asked ChatGPT to give feedback for a report that would encourage learning and improvement. And it gave me this: provide a more in-depth analysis and interpretation of assessment findings, explain how the results can inform learning improvements, and include specific actionable recommendations for enhancing the learning process based on assessment results. So being able to generate text like this can help assessment professionals provide better feedback to faculty, which in turn then can help improve assessment in the long run. If we want to make assessment findings more visible, I believe there is artificial intelligence now that will actually help with graphs and figures, but I haven't cracked that nut yet, so I'm not going to talk about that. Instead, I'm going to talk about how we take language where we're describing assessment findings and have asked ChatGPT to help us make it more accessible to different audiences. So one thing it's really good at is revising complicated findings into language that would be accessible to different audiences. So this one I wrote. I used to teach experimental psychology, and my students could never understand interactions. And so what I've put here is a description of an interaction in sort of statistical language. So there was a significant interaction between sex and generational status, such that first-generation male college students performed significantly worse than continuing generation students, but first-generation female students did not differ significantly from other groups. Now that makes perfect sense to me, but if we did a poll of how many of you it made sense to, my hunch is it would be pretty low. So I gave this exact thing to ChatGPT, and I instructed it to rephrase it in ways that would be clear to a non-expert audience. And it revised it into this. When we look at male college students who were the first in their families to attend college, so it's now taken the jargon out, right? Not first generation male college students. They didn't do as well academically as students who had family members who had attended college. Probably everybody understands that. However, when we look at female college students who were the first in their families to attend college, their academic performance was similar to other groups of students. So I think it did a pretty good job there. I might want to ask it to rephrase again to avoid deficit language because it's sort of phrased still in a way that implies that the failures with the first generation male college students, which we might not like. But for the purposes of this talk, I left it there. And then I thought, okay, we've communicated this to our board of trustees or our cabinet, and they've decided it's a real problem. They understand it, and they're like, okay, we need to put some supports in place for first generation male college students. So now, excuse me, I asked it to rephrase it into language that would encourage a policy change or a funding recommendation, right? So maybe you've presented it to the cabinet and they want to present it to the board of trustees. And so this is the same original that we had just looked at, you know, the simple language one from the previous slide. And now it's changed to, we observed that first generation male college students may benefit from additional institutional support to address specific challenges they face in their academic performance. These insights underscore the value of providing targeted support to ensure the success of all students within our diverse community. Now, it's a little wordy. I like things to be concise, so I might ask it to be more concise if I was going to work with it a little further. But you can imagine taking these two paragraphs and putting them together into a grant application or some other place where you're going to actually ask for money. Now, thanks to ChatGPT, we get our initiative funded, and you can take the same information and ask ChatGPT to create a flyer to recruit first-generation male college students into your program. And so now this is that original simple language one, and it's turned it into a flyer for us. And one thing that I want you to notice here is when I asked it to create a flyer, that would now be facing the first generation male college students, ChatGPT was actually smart enough to move away from deficit language, right? So now it says, we know you may face unique challenges. So it's not that you're weak, it's that you have unique challenges that are external to you. And it's using all of that culturally responsive pedagogy we like to see. So it's saying your success is important to us. We're dedicated to making you thrive. So it's boosting sense of belonging and all that good stuff. And the thing that I find very interesting about this is it's doing that even though I didn't actually say that in the prompt. So never in this string of prompts did I say use inclusive language, use culturally responsive pedagogy. I just said make it student facing now.
Karen,
Yes.
good question. There's some good topics here from Kevin and Anne. Good questions. Kevin, would you like to speak to your comment?
Would I like to speak to what? I'm sorry.
Kevin.
Did you say Karen or Kevin?
Kevin.
Sorry.
Yeah, which comment are you referring to?
The one that you about the discussion regarding the what you did about your center.
Talking about the role of jargon?
Yes.
Yeah, so we've just had many discussions over the past several years about jargon and the proper place of jargon, and try to balance the when do we change language to make it more friendly, more general, more approachable for novices and non-experts, and when is it appropriate to use jargon. Jargon serves a very useful and sometimes critical role in communicating things that need to be precise, that need to be understandable to people who are experienced or experts in the field. So just try to figure out, when do we change that, and when do we insist that no, that is the proper word phrase to use, and that's what has to be there. And some people may not understand that, and that's okay.
Yeah, no, and I think that goes back to the whole idea that ChatGPT will not do your work for you, but it will engage you in a dialectic process where, if the jargon is important, and I would argue, being sort of an equity person, that jargon is appropriate when it has been taught, right? So if that term was taught in the course or prerequisite course, and so all students have had access to understanding it, then it can be perfectly appropriate to test it or to include it. And in fact, doing so gives students practice using it. But what happens with experts, and I know I do this all the time, is we use terms that we don't recognize as jargon. And so ChatGPT can help you make informed decisions about where you want to use certain words and where you don't, I think. Does that make sense?
So Karen, it does make sense. So Karen, I think the way I'm interpreting a lot of what you're talking about, a lot of what you're demonstrating or showing us, in my mind, we're at a place with this new set of tools where we're trying to figure out, what kind of tool is this? Where does it fit within our workflow? What are the proper uses of this? And trying to figure out, it seems like you're saying pretty clearly that no, we can't just push some of this work off onto the tool, but it can be useful for prompting us for further reflection and some engagement. And some of the suggestions are good, but some of them we're going to reject. And that still requires human judgment. This is not a tool that we can just push off and say, write my SLOs, revise my SLOs, but we can ask it as if it were, almost as if it were a trusted colleague, provide me with feedback.
Right. And I mean, it's not bad at doing the first draft either. But, I think everybody in academia, we're in academia because we enjoy disagreeing. I mean, maybe that's an unfair statement, but if you think about so much of what learning is, it's this, no, this, the review process for journal articles, right? I write this, the reviewer says, no, you have to do this. I say, no, but I did this, right? And ChatGPT is a great partner in that, because oftentimes when we're doing the first draft of work, when we're first preparing a class, when we're first writing an SLO, we're all by ourselves. And what we can come up with isn't as good as what we can come up with if either somebody else gives us a draft and we get to criticize that, right? So if you ask ChatGPT to write it, practically everybody on this webinar will be happy to see what's wrong with what ChatGPT did. So I don't mind having ChatGPT start the conversation or me start the conversation, but we just have to view it as a conversation where we are improving each other's work.
Thank
Was
you
there
for answering
another?
those. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You can continue.
And I'm basically sort of at the wrap-up point. You know, I have at the end here some of the Grand Challenges publications. Many of them are linked if you want to learn more about the Grand Challenges project. And then if you want to get involved in the Grand Challenges project, we are just taking in a new batch of people to our implementation teams. So you can follow this link or scan this QR code to either join our mailing list or say you want to join an implementation team. And if you missed the link on the first slide, this is where you can get the slides. And I have 14 minutes for discussion if there is any.
Jarek, do you have any?
Yes, sorry. Yes, we do. We do have a couple of questions that I think would be worthy of our attention here, and they are posted on the tablet Padlet that we have in the background. Karen, if you don't mind to talk to address a bit of a that issue always comes up, and it seems like it's one of those questions that just kind of like, you know, seems to simmer in the background, and that would be that of privacy concerns, right? So instructors are concerned, I'm reading this off the Padlet here, of test items created by them and end up in ChatGPT database and end up being disclosed to other users.
Well, the interesting thing about ChatGPT is it doesn't give you the same thing twice.
Well, that's exactly my understanding. It's just, I tell you, it seems like collectively, let's just say we react to ChatGPT as if it were a Google or some, you know, stamp of approval, right? You just say, oh, you get an answer. Well, then that's it. Well, the point here is, and I think you made it more than once, you know, you ask for clarification. If it doesn't work, well, you think of something else. You have a conversation with it as if it were a human being, right? I mean, if it's an intelligent entity, right? There's intelligence there for a reason. So I think that's the part that's kind of missing. So yeah, I would appreciate if you could just elaborate on this. What you just said.
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of privacy or controlling test questions, I'm pretty sure that is not an issue, because if a student asks, and you know, in fact, I could have done a whole new session on how students can effectively use ChatGPT to study, because ChatGPT is a great study tool. You know, you can say, please give me 6 multiple choice questions on organic chemistry structures, and it will generate questions. And you can, if they're too easy, you can say, make them harder. But every time it's going to generate a question, it's going to be a new one. Now, the extent to which all questions are not that different in multiple choice questions is sort of another issue. So there may be similarity because a multiple choice question on data triangulation only has so much information that it's recycling in different ways. But I don't think you're going to actually lose your questions in that way. You know, from a broader perspective, the use of ChatGPT, is it detectable, right? So there's certain places now that are saying that you have to cite or admit if you use ChatGPT. Those aren't quite privacy concerns, but they're sort of adjacent concerns. And, you know, my personal stance on it is that we need to teach people how to use ChatGPT, and that's really been my goal here, that you don't just take what ChatGPT gives you and take it. You take it and think about it and revise it and make it your own. And then, just like we don't ask students to confess to using calculators, we either say use a calculator or don't use a calculator. That's kind of my view on the use of ChatGPT.
Right. So Karen, to your point of using it as a advisor or a tutor, you know, it can talk now. If you install the iPhone app, you can activate the voice feature. And I tell you, driving to work, I have a conversation on any topic. I don't have to wait for anybody to tell me anything. I just simply ask the question, and one question leads to another. I don't understand this concept. Please elaborate on this. What would you do in this scenario? So all of a sudden, it's just become overnight this entity. I cannot obviously call it a person. I can't part from. It's just something that that I do. It's become instantly kind of like part of at least my life. So I think that you're absolutely right. Even those efforts, kind of like have you used ChatGPT or not? Well, yeah, I can say yes or no. But then again, hey, did you talk to Karen this morning by any chance? You know what I mean? Like, how are you so smart all of a sudden? Did Karen give you this idea? We don't ask these questions normally, do we? Right? And again, because this is an entity that we have created, we still react to it as if it were this again, old-fashioned piece of text, right? You read it there, therefore you provide a resource. You provide a reference. I obviously don't have any problem with it. I'm really leaning more towards your thinking that, hey, people, let's figure out how to make it work for our benefit instead of trying to chase our tails, whether students are cheating with it or not. Those are almost conflicting, ideas when you think about it, because again, just like we have this discussion about assessment, right? Is it a judgment or is it really for me to help you learn? Okay.
And just like a great tip for students is you can actually tell your students, submit your assignment to ChatGPT with my rubric before you turn it in, and ask ChatGPT to tell you areas of weakness. So, the same thing I was suggesting for writing accreditation or assessment reports, I think students can really benefit. Or if you're trying to write a journal article, you can give the journal guidelines and say, check to see if I'm applying APA style correctly. So it does have a lot of. And one other thing, sorry, I could go on forever. My ideas for ChatGPT, oftentimes the first time faculty teach on a topic, especially a really complicated topic, they forget to explain some things because they assume students would know them. And so you can give lecture notes to ChatGPT and say, if this was an introductory course, what information should I consider adding? And I think that can be a really great way to rapidly improve pedagogy before the students miss it on a test, right? ChatGPT can be your first year student or your fourth year student.
I feel like you just answered the question I was going to ask. I know we need to move on to Yao's talk. So if you had a couple of minutes to maybe just address some of the key points, but one of the questions is, how can AI support changes in the perceptions of faculty and students to differentiate between criticism and sincere attempts to enhance their educational experience for the benefit of students? And just like you were saying, how we improve our pedagogy, through that interaction with AI. So I didn't know if you wanted to add to any of to anything you just said, because you were going down that trail. So
yeah, well, when I was a new faculty member, I had the best faculty member who was my next door neighbor, and he was trained as a librarian originally and then an experimental psychologist, and he was incredibly picky about every little detail, but he was the nicest person you ever met. And so he could give the most detailed, picky feedback in a way that made you feel like you were hugged. And I would sit there in my office trying to do grading as a first year professor and just so overwhelmed by bad writing and what do I say about this? And for the first 6 months, I would be like, Bill, how do I say, fix your grammar nicely? And he'd holler back, say. And then a year after that, it was all in my head. I would just be like, what would Bill say? And I would know how to do it. And I think ChatGPT can serve that function for us. So most faculty want students to be able to hear their criticism and not feel hurt by it. But it's really great for, how do I give this criticism in a way that promotes a sense of belonging, growth mindset, self-efficacy, and rephrasing in those kinds of ways. So is that sort of what you were getting at?
Very much so. Yeah. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, so we are going to move on now. Thank you very much, Karen. It was every talk I always walk away from, oh my goodness, so many ideas to apply. And I know the next one's going to be the same way as well. So we are very happy to introduce Yaozhang Hill, who is here to talk about 101 creative ideas to use AI in education. Is a crowdsourced collection contributed by authors from 19 countries across the globe. This presentation will present classroom assessment strategies inspired by this collection that involves skillful use of AI to facilitate students' creative, reflective, and critical thinking skills with concrete examples.
Thank you, Amanda. First of all, I want to say that in my position, I'm a faculty specialist in Assessment and Curriculum Support Center at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I do not teach. I'm not instructional faculty members, although I taught before. My background is in language assessment, curriculum development, and program evaluation. So all of the ideas that I'm sharing today mostly are from this collection called 101 Creative Ideas to Use AI in Education, particularly in teaching and assessment. Again, this collection is a crowdsourced. It has two formats of presentation. One of them is a PDF. A lot of the references used in today's talk referring to the PDF version. There is also a Google Slide version that is slightly different than the PDF version, but the Google Slide version, you can look at some of the screenshots more clearly. The collection is free to use, meaning that you can adapt some of the concept, you can change it to your own use. You just have to attribute to the original author and make your content the same way with Creative Commons license for other people to use as well. Today, after my talk, I hope that everybody would be able to identify particularly some summative assessment strategies that can allow formative assessment to happen, as well as some particular formative assessment strategies. Also consider ways to use AI tools to advance equity in teaching and assessment, and explore AI tools and resources in teaching and assessment. I'm going to give majority of the time on the summative assessment, and I'm going to explain why I do that. When I was reading through these 101 ideas, as an institutional assessment leader, I really care about what pedagogical or assessment tasks can serve that as accommodating performance-based, possibly authentic tasks for us to use them to judge students' level of achievement on learning outcomes, because that has the biggest impact on program learning assessment, right? As we assessment leaders know. We know a good performance-based or authentic assessment allow us not only to perform that judgment on students' learning, but also allow the formative assessment to happen along the way. And the formative assessment more serve as checking on students' progress, monitor their process and progress, and provide feedback and allowing that cycle of refinement, both in teaching and the students' learning to happen. So because my focus, first I want to come in from the lens of the supporting program and institutional level assessment. So I want to talk most about accommodating assessment strategies. Then I will be talking about relooking at these 101 ideas and how they address the grand challenges, particularly the goal related to using assessment for rapid pedagogical improvement. But let's get into the accommodating assessment strategies first. Among these 101 ideas, I summarized all of them in the sense of what the instructors have students do. I identified 4 types of formative assessment. The first is about engaging students in some sort of research or inquiry tasks. The second allows students to produce something. It's product development. The third is having students to interact in a interactive communication settings. And the third is for students to self-reflect and provide critiques to themselves, AI, or others. performance or responses. So let's take a look at them one by one. When I talk about inquiry and research tasks, those tasks involve students investigating, inquiring, and researching facts, processes, options for solutions, phenomena, and so on. The types of tasks listed here, for example, case studies, documents and policy research, literary text analysis. This is particularly relevant for teaching students writing, problem-based inquiry across all disciplines, and of course, research projects. Let's take a look at two examples. In first example, this is a problem-based scenario analysis where AI serves as the case generator. In this task, we intend to assess students as future instructional designers, so these students are in College of Education, for their ability to analyze learner scenarios so they can identify learner struggles, therefore identify or come up with possible solutions through these problem scenarios. The instructor gives the ChatGPT specifications for it to generate a story or a scenario. Let's take a look at how that's being carried out. This is what the instructor's prompt is like. The instructor is very friendly, but I'm sure if you're just straightforward with ChatGPT, you'll be fine. Anyway, so the instructor asked ChatGPT to come up with a potential story with some characteristics that the author is going to specify. ChatGPT said, sure, I'm going to write you a story, now give me the characteristics. So ChatGPT understands what the instructor is trying to do. Then the instructor gives ChatGPT these stories of a student starts undergraduate studies and having all these difficulties with their finishing the degree. After this, ChatGPT created these 300-word stories. Then how can we transfer this story into a problem-based scenario? This is what the instructor did. Can you retell the story without providing any information about how John did to succeed? So they left out John's strategies to succeed despite the struggles he experienced. And he said, I want to use it as a problem-based scenario. Therefore, in these two paragraphs on the top, you can see it's a very simple scenario, described what John is facing in his life while completing his degree. This scenario then is presented to students to identify John's challenges and for students as educational experts to help John or discuss the strategies John can use to be successful in pursuing the college degree. And look at the instructor is also very conscientious about the potential biases in these scenarios generated, right? They talk about why do you choose a male character? Of course, I'm not sure we take the answers from ChatGPT for granted. So that is for another level of consideration, which I'm going to talk about when we talk about the critique type of assessment. The second example is about absurd writing for genre study, and AI serves as a writer for the writing samples. In this kind of task, we can assess students' ability to analyze writing samples and identify key features of a particular genre. So, for example, the ChatGPT can provide writing in response to absurd situations, such as write an obituary for a toothbrush. We don't usually do that, but giving it an absurd situation allows students to quickly focus on the elements of writing rather than on the substance of the writing, the content of the writing. Let me give you one example. For example, write agony ant column. This is what the author used for a tuna sandwich that doesn't want to be eaten. So this is some of the maybe the culturally responsive piece comes in, because at first I do not know what is agony ant column is as someone coming from a foreign country, right? But I guess it's just like a consultant on the newspaper who gave people advice. So I'm not going to read through this, but let's take a look at the first paragraph. It starts by, Dear troubled tuna sandwich, I understand you're going through a difficult time grappling with the imminent fate of being consumed. then it says your feelings are valid. It's essential to address them. So when I'm reading the first paragraph, immediately coming to my mind, I need to think about what is the function of this paragraph is supposed to serve rather than the substance of the content. So now I understand the first paragraph is to try to address or validate the person's feeling, the requester's feeling, make sure their feeling is valid, and then talk about its needs to be addressed so that people don't feel their feelings or emotions are trivial. So that's the function of the first paragraph, so on and so forth. So students will go through the same process and go through each of the paragraph, identify the key elements of this particular genre, and then they can produce the writings in that genre as well afterwards. So those are just two simple examples. There are many ways that AI can play for students to engage in those inquiry and research-based tasks. For example, AI can serve as a rapid developer of case study scenarios, stories, fictional documents. Notice that the word fictional, because just as Karen said, AI is not very good in providing factual information, but you can ask AI to provide a fictional documents, fictional stories, or literary text, which AI is very good at in producing a particular text that fits into a particular genre or style of the author. AI can also help generating brainstorming, research topics, inquiry topics, write summaries, and serve as a proofreader and editor. So that's about inquiry type of tasks. Now let's take a look at the product development types of tasks. In this kind of task, students produce a product or prepare a performance for hopefully potential authentic audiences. Here are some of the task types. Report, students can write a project report, a research report, so on and so forth. They can develop a video game, a model, or prototype. They can develop some written products such as a product campaign, marketing plan, policy procedures. They can develop a book. They can produce multimedia products such as a podcast, digital, virtual exhibit, and so on and so forth. Let me give you the first example. This is a game development where AI serves as the co-developer of a game. This task assesses students' ability to develop a video game, of course, understanding the key elements of video game development and document the process with AI's assistance. In this task, students use a chatbot to generate ideas on a unique video game and have AI to assist in certain developmental steps. So what are the developmental steps? And this is not only limited to video game, it can be across to any product development process. And let's take a look at what those steps can be. First, AI can help provide ideas. This is the idea 8, right? You can say, give me some ideas for the video game that has this and that elements. Give me some of the, some of the things I want to consider how this video game should be played. Then students analyze and evaluate AI's output. They can iteratively ask AI, so, okay, I don't like this character or this plot, change this plot to another plot, and have AI regenerate the elements or how the video game should be played. Then students independently, this is where the creative side comes in. Their students have to design the characters themselves. They have to decide how many, who, their gender, their particular functions, their behaviors. They have to idealize those key elements. And what are the maps? How many towns or how many regions of the world that the game player needs to go into, and so on and so forth. Then AI provides structure for elements. This is the language used by the author, but my understanding is that the AI provided the detailed content as well as a computer Python coding for each of these elements. For example, if a student designed a character that is a male and dressed in a particular outfit, has a particular hairstyle, the AI can help to write the code for those. Then students will complete the coding and have AI to check its accuracy. Afterwards, because students went through every single process, then students write a documentation and reflect on the process. This is, for me, is a perfect example what a game developing professional could possibly use AI in real life as well. So I highly advocate this kind of process rather than preventing students from using AI, immerse our students in the AI tools so that they can function in real life where all the professionals are already doing this. Let's take a look at some of the example prompts. So for example, in the first step to generating ideas for the video game, we can ask the AI to generate a bulleted list of ideas that combines Space Invaders and Pac-Man. And after that, this is the Python code for the AI to generate a particular elements of the game. Okay, and then the students can continue. Because going back, imagine a video game development. It usually can take years for a complex game to be developed, or like definitely longer than 1 semester. But using this process, students can rapidly develop a game with the help of AI that greatly increase the efficiency. But it does not take away students' creativity, where they must play a critical role in designing the key elements of a product. Second example, this is a product campaign as a marketing plan, and the AI served as a client to assess students' ability to analyze customers' needs and develop a product marketing plan. AI acts like a client who gives students a memo, talk about what kind of product and how they want this campaign or marketing plan to be carried out. Let's take a look at how this is done. So students can ask AI to impersonate a business owner or a company manager who needs a marketing strategy to sell a product, and write a brief or a memo for a marketing expert, which is student, to create a marketing strategy. Then here, as you can see, it specifies the elements to be included in the memo. Identify the product, audience, market reach, budget, timescales, and so on. And then you can see ChatGPT produced this memo or brief in the format of a business brief. And students then use this document to conduct a customer analysis and develop their marketing plan based on the analyzing of customers' needs. So that is a final product. As you can see, it's a still pretty complex product. But now thinking about, just developing this customer's needs or scenario in the original way can take instructors a lot of time, but now we can develop this in a matter of minutes. The third example that I want to give to you is for students' ability to identify and use themes and styles of a particular author. So this is particularly important for writing, especially English. Any literary studies, you can use this type of task, or writing in a discipline. In this example, students create a modern pilgrim story by studying Chaucer's style, based on students' experience and Chaucer's intentions and the stylistic code of the writing. It has multiple steps. So first, AI would act like the author Chaucer and provide students with historical context and information of pilgrims. So students have to understand where this type of writing, this particular writing comes from, and understanding its historical background. Then students would design a new pilgrim based on their personal experience and the styles of the author. Then prompt AI to write such a story. So students actually don't do the writing. They only need to identify the elements for the storyline, basically. So for example, it's about a man around 50 years old who is undergoing the midlife crisis, spends all his pilgrimage complaining about his sore feet, right? So you can make this whatever that you want that's relevant to students' experience. Then students use AI to, using text to image tools to illustrate this pilgrim and create a voice, shares, discuss the final products. But don't forget the intended learning outcome is for students to understand the author's themes and stylistic features of the author's writing. So that's why students do not do the writing. They analyze the writing. Another example, this is biotech company setup. So assess students' ability or knowledge of the procedure and steps to get a drug from bench to bedside, meaning get a drug approved by FDA so that they can start their company. And the AI serves as the stories for the research. And let's take a look at how it's done. The prompt is, tell me the backstory of a fictional biotech startup company that has a new antifungal drug approved. Okay, and then the ChatGPT creates a story, but as you can see, the key elements is several rounds of clinical trials. If I am the person giving ChatGPT the prompts, you can see what's the problem here. The story does not have enough details for students to understand the background. So you may want to, students may improve the prompt by saying, list all the required FDA required clinical trial steps in the story. So then ChatGPT would have to say, okay, they have to conduct the animal clinical trials, then small sample group and large sample group and so on and so forth. So whatever FDA requires for students to analyze that. Okay, so with those 4 examples, let's take a look at the summary of the AI roles can play in product-based assessment types. Text-based AI tools like ChatGPT can serve as a potential client or customer who provide the specifications of a service or products that they desire. And they can serve as a co-developer, leaving students to generate original ideas, but then they can do the legwork to carry out the tedious part of the work, such as filling in the details, editing, and proofreading. And they can rapid prototype of products for students to critique and refine. When we use image or multimedia tools such as Dart-E or Midjourney and Stable Diffusion, so on and so forth, we can create image as logos, images for infographics, and illustrations for books and publications. There are many examples related to this type, but given the time limit, those are the 4 examples I have. Interaction tasks really speaks to the strengths of ChatGPT. In this kind of task, students carry out interactive communication with other people, including simulated people carried out by ChatGPT. And those tasks can include interviews, debates, authentic interaction with a potential clients, patients, students, or collaborators, and role plays. Take a look at one example. In this interaction, this example, they're nursing students, they have to interact with a patient, and the AI can function as a patient. The task is to assess students' ability to communicate professionally with patients in difficult conversations. Let's just take a moment to take a look at this mini course. I want to give you a live demo. So the instructors developed this course. Everybody can take it. Introduction, what it's about, learning objectives. And then in scenario 1, talking about this patient who has dementia in his late 80s. Now, when you come to this patient, what do you say? So here they're using branched out communications. Students have to select which one that they want to use to communicate with this patient. If I choose this one, and you can see there is a followed up interaction sequence. So AI can help you to generate these interaction sequence for each types of the branching that students choose. So like rapid material generations, right? And then the teacher can provide, if you did it successfully, it gives you positive reinforcement and feedback. If you did not do it successfully, things will go very sore. As you can see, the follow-up interactions goes really badly. And then students will receive this feedback as why it goes wrong. So this is a great example of using AI, and the students can do this. This is a summative assessment, but with formative assessment along the way. The second example is an interview task, and there's so many of those. I would say quite a few of those examples in the 101 ideas. Assess student skills in crafting or drafting interview questions and analyzing qualitative data. AI can serve as an interviewee. Let's take a look at an example. So first we ask the AI to impersonate an experienced instructional designer, and then ask AI, say, okay, if I want to conduct a learner, I believe it's called a learner context analysis, what question should I ask about the learner? Then ChatGPT said, okay, you should ask these questions. Then students can ask ChatGPT to provide, say, give me an example of the learner with this information provided. And then the ChatGPT will provide a learner with all of these parameters filled out, like their demographic information, prior knowledge, and so on and so forth. And then students can start asking that simulated learner more in-depth questions about their learning experiences and their learning needs. And then you can ask Chat.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. We had some questions in the chat, so I just want to know if you want to address those right now.
Sure, let's see.
Okay. Eileen had some questions and some concerns that had a little bit of dialogue on there, but there's concern about when people say students can't, sorry, my little icon's in the way, can't do the writing, and basically clarified later on. And Eileen, please feel free to unmute if I'm not doing justice to your question, but I think it's hard to analyze well if you can't do, same for coding, physics, etc. For example, as a simple English teacher, I can't analyze how well someone solved a complicated calculus problem since I can't remember any of my calculus from high school. Could we please have some strategies for helping students master the skill? I can't tell you how many people just use AI to generate, but if I ask them to free write a paragraph in front of me, they can't write a sentence on their own. Eileen, if you would like to chime in and clarify a little bit, happy to. I just wanted to make sure we did justice to your question before we got too far.
I think what I understand that question is that now we have all these tools of ChatGPT, but then if ChatGPT is doing all the writing, then how can we develop students' writing skills? Okay, yeah. So a lot of the inquiry tasks that I talked about leads to the final product production. So for example, in that genre analysis, I struggled the most as to write when I was an elementary and middle school students, because the teacher just gave me a topic, the most memorable day in your life. I was like, I study every single day. There is no memorable day particularly for me, right? I don't have a life, whatever. So there is not enough raw materials for me or experiences for me to go on when I encounter a particular topic. I think having ChatGPT generate multiple sources of a student sample work, and then have students study them, they understand what it's like, would be super helpful for students to develop that fluency and competency in writing. So for that one example I gave is that absurd writing where you can make the writing like in a fictional situation where students analyze the writing, they analyze the features of the writing. So the example I give that, in that agony and column, when the first paragraph is to validate the requester's feeling, then we can ask students to think about, okay, this is what ChatGPT produced. Is there any other ways that what are other phrases, what are other statements that we can use to validate other people's feelings in this type of genre? If students see examples like that, they are more likely to be able to produce something. And then in other example that I'm going to talk about later is that students can have multiple AI tools to generate responses. Then students can analyze them without understanding. So I'm from language acquisition background. Language acquisition talks about input hypotheses and output hypotheses. Basically, you need to have input, and then there's also like intake hypotheses. You look at what's in there in front of you, and you intake, meaning you pay attention to specific features, and then you output, then you produce your own productions based on what you have intaked in analyzing the features of other people's work. So that kind of task may help. sequence of tasks.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we can go over the questions after I finish summarizing all 4 types of questions, because the fourth type, the next type, talk about critiques and reflections and may address some of those. Okay, so then coming back to talk about AI function as interviews, right? If you are trying to train students in the skills of crafting interview questions, students can see whether ChatGPT generates responses that allow them to answer research questions and refine the interview questions afterwards. They can practice responding to participants of different background, either it's children, youth, or an indigenous senior, elder, right? You would approach them differently. Then for the responses that ChatGPT generated, that serves as the data for practicing qualitative analysis. I'm going to go over this very quickly. It's self-explanatory. We can use ChatGPT as a debate partner to support students' ability to debate using evidence-based arguments. ChatGPT can explain the debate roles, and then you can ask ChatGPT to act as a debate partner, and then say, I am ready, start. Give ChatGPT a timeline, 20 minutes. So let's debate on this topic. This is your position, this is my position. And then ChatGPT can start that way. Okay, so summarize of AI roles in the interaction tasks. AI can serve as, again, patients, clients, students, so impersonate a persona, be an interviewee, and create the materials that is providing that context for interaction, like role play scenarios and materials. The last task, I put it last actually because I believe it's the most important. I believe this kind of reflection and critique task should be accompanying all previous 3 tasks. Let's take a look at some of the ramifications of reflection and critique tasks. So students can reflect on their own thinking, process, performance, products. They can solicit and use feedback from AI and peers, self-assess based on implicit or explicit criteria, provide feedback to others, critique others' output, responses, products, performances, and critically reflect on the use of AI. It's a laundry list, but this kind of task is extremely important, and I would advocate that one or more of these tasks should be included in all AI-related assignments, or assignments that related where we involve AI for assistance. Sample tasks: students reflect, self-assess based on AI's feedback, document and refine one's thinking process and skills, especially the process of using AI, how that has worked for them, provide feedback to peers, and study and critique AI's bias, limitations, and opportunities. And number 4 here is what I think is the most important whenever we engage students with AI usage in assignment. Example number 1, this is an excellent activity for developing students' metacognitive skills, develop their digital literacy in using AI. But this one particular is about assessing students' prompt writing skills. You can use this to assess all sorts of students' critical digital literacy skills, like how your ability to critically use AI's responses. It can be a log on just that. So in this particular task, students will give 10 prompts to AI each week, and they record AI's responses, and then they answer about whether they do some sort of critical analysis of these responses, like are there limitations to the responses, the quality of the answers, and the similarities in style and form across different answers. If you access this file asks students different questions as the week progress, harder and more critical questions as students progress through the weeks of study. In example number 2, we have art-based peer feedback. And for me, I believe this is particularly relevant for culturally responsive teaching and learning. In this case, the author can assess students' ability to provide feedback in a variety of ways, especially in the non-traditional ways. Students formulate their feedback based on a rubric that's a traditional way, and then they ask ChatGPT to create prompts for DALL-E, which is a text-to-image AI tool, to generate image to go with the text version of their feedback. Okay, aside, I want to tell you that this is a great strategy. If you have ever used text to image tools, you may always feel so, I'm always feel so frustrated because when I enter a text for DALL-E to generate image, it does not look like what I wanted. However, tell ChatGPT what you wanted and ask ChatGPT to create prompts for DALL-E to interpret and generate image is a much efficient way for using the text to image function. Anyways, the final feedback include both text-based feedback, prompt to DALL-E, and the DALL-E generated image. So this image, for example, is about eagle soaring high in the sky. This represents the performance that high performance that does not need any changes. This is an image to present that. If you are from particular culture, especially indigenous culture, this image would look much different, right? And this offers the opportunity for culturally responsive content in your course. This example 3 is an AI critique task, is to assess students' ability to compare and analyze AI's responses. So students use different tools. You can see here we have 3 tools listed: ChatGPT, Copilot, or Bard. I think it's a Google Bard, right? Microsoft Bing, all of these ChatGPT AI tools, big companies, to create coursework, right? On the one hand, we have instructors is afraid for students to use AI tools for completing their homework. But here, this instructor asks students to use ChatGPT to complete their homework using the assignment instructions and the evaluation criteria. Students then join the instructor in collaborative discussions and the critiques of the AI's responses. So in this day and age, it is very hard for us to distinguish whether students' homework is done by AI or themselves. But why not then utilize this opportunity to foster that critical thinking skills? Have students just have ChatGPT do it. And then we can have students to critique in real life whether ChatGPT do a good job. And soon you will notice, just as Karen said, ChatGPT are not capable of in-depth critical thinking skills. I'll talk about the limitations later. I'm not going to go over these, but there's so many digital literacy and AI critical reflection tasks presented through these 100 ideas. I'm going to give you one moment just to read through them. And then maybe in 30 seconds, Amanda can read me some of the questions. Just give everybody a moment to read through them. Okay, hopefully you have an opportunity to skim at least some of them. I want to particularly mentioning about 2 of the activities. Deconstruct and reverse engineer the AI's responses. I attended one of the AI-related conference. I was very impressed by one of the high school history teacher's tasks. What he did is that he said, here are the 3 articles, generating arguments based on your reading of these articles. So ChatGPT generated the arguments. What he had students do is to now go through these 3 articles, find the evidence that supports the arguments that ChatGPT generated. So students then learn these historians' way of thinking, right? You need to use evidence-based arguments. So students do that, they discuss in small groups, and in the end, the instructor have students read another 3 new articles and then generate arguments on their own. So using this deconstruct and reverse engineering AI's responses tasks as a scaffolding for students to independently conduct a task. It's a great activity. This one, as Karen also said, AI fabricate references. So one of the critical evaluation tasks is for students to critical review AI's responses, and they themselves go out and find out the sources to support their arguments for information literacy. Okay, I think I have maybe a few minutes to address questions, and then I'll continue.
All right, thank you so much, Al. This is there's really
I'm not done. I'm just saying this is a
sorry.
good pausing point for answer some of the addressing some pressing questions.
That's right. So it's okay for me to ask one?
Yeah.
Okay. Eileen Gum is bringing up a number of issues from her English teaching perspective. Eileen, would you please elaborate a bit, because it's I'm typing as fast as I can, and there's a number of other people who chimed in, and it's it's just difficult to follow the conversation. So maybe we can start with Eileen, if you don't mind.
There are several. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's okay. I think that the purpose of this presentation is more about a different use of ChatGPT and different AI tools. It's just a concern that constantly faculty bring up is, if the goal is for the students to be able to generate, draft, edit, and then analyze, how are we supposed to help ensure that they are actually learning how to do those fundamental skills? Because, like, I can't analyze like a complex physics problem because I'm not a physics person. But if I'm taking a physics class, I will be learning how to do that. But it's very easy to throw the problem into an AI generator and have it generate the whole thing for me. And the teacher wouldn't know if I'm really learning it or not unless I'm sitting in the ears right on the homework. Right? But we're not in that reality anymore. We teach a lot of different modalities. So there are faculty right now in how powerful these tools are. And yes, we do need to teach students how to use these tools appropriately, but some of the prompts were really frightening for me as an English teacher. And I know my colleagues would be like, okay, no one's typing their papers anymore. I mean, I have a high school student, his English teacher will not let them type their papers anymore because he has no way to make sure that they actually wrote their own papers, which is kind of a step backwards. So it would be nice to hear some of the ways we can deal with those issues.
Yes, 3 points. I can think of one example. So one example is writing in a particular style. So one of the example in the 101 idea is that for the students will ask ChatGPT to act as a particular author and generating a particular literary text on the topic based on that author's style and genre, and the students will analyze that genre and reproduce. And the second example is that you can see some of the tasks here. Some of the critical tasks that some faculty use is that they ask students to have ChatGPT to write an essay, let's say public health, right? Write an essay on that. And they ask students to write an essay on their own. And then they ask students to document the process where they compare ChatGPT's essay and their essay and how they used ChatGPT's essay to improve their essay, as well as identifying possible limitations from ChatGPT's essay. So it's actually higher level thinking skills. Not only students produce, they have to compare, analyze the differences, and produce that documentation. So providing the documentation is one of the critical strategy to address that. So that's the second point. The third point I want to make is that I, as assessment professionals, I ask ChatGPT to proofread and edit my writing all the time. But then what I do is that I said, here is my text, here is ChatGPT's text. I need to go back to see what areas of improvement that ChatGPT made on my writing. The same thing that we have students do, right? Then I identify, okay, look at the ChatGPT's writing based on criteria that you provided. How about cohesion and cohesive devices usage? How about organization? How about intersentential transition? So on and so forth. As an English teacher, you probably have a set of things you want students to look over, and students can look over them, do the comparison based on the checklist of items to do that comparison. So that's just some of the strategies I can think of out of my head. Okay, with that, I'm going to continue. Now, we have 10 critical tasks examples here. Now, after you give students these critical tasks, what do you have them do? What are the concrete questions you ask them? So here, I'm not going to read through them, but here are the critical reflection questions we can have students to reflect. Especially this is advancing students' mindset, equity-based mindset, right? What voices were included? What voices were excluded? So that students can think about, especially images for image generations. If you type in the ChatGPT or DALL-E, say computer engineers, you can see a lot of white male images being generated. Then we can prompt our students in thinking about, why is that? What stereotypes or limitations are there? What biases? So on. Okay, and then of course, thinking about how to acknowledge ChatGPT's or other AI tools output. I have some concrete criteria for you. If you want help students to critically evaluate ChatGPT's responses, particularly this one is called prompt. How interesting, how relevant. It's talk about provenness, whether the factual information provided by ChatGPT can be proved. And this would require students to go to do that primary and the secondary literature search. Relevance, that use some judgment, objectivity, whether the method they use is appropriate for analysis, presentation in terms of organization, the polish of the language quality, and so on, timeliness of the information, and so on. And here are some of the other things you can consider. Quality of the language. Is it appropriate for the discourse genre in your discipline? Reference and referencing style, and so on and so forth. A quick summary of the AI pitfalls. After you have students critically review, students will notice that ChatGPT make factual errors. So for example, I put in ChatGPT, say, write a bio for Yao Zhanghill, who is employed at University of Hawaii at Manoa. And then it says, I am a biologist. No, I'm not a biologist. So it's definitely, there's lots of factual errors there. Fabricated references, never trust the references the ChatGPT gave to you. And it lacks depth and alignment with the learning topic and the intended outcomes. So students can give you a response, but it's so generic that it's often not sufficient to fulfill your particular course objective. And it does lack technical proficiency. So if you're thinking about helping students writing, help students write in a particular have some more in-depth critical thinking elements and critical review skills. This is talking about, Karen also said, if you ask ChatGPT to give you multiple choice question, it's hard for ChatGPT to give you a hard multiple choice questions because they're just not there yet. Summary of these culminating assessment tasks. What I want to say is that when educators presenting these 100 ideas, they usually present it in a way as pedagogical tasks. But what I did is that I see the possibilities for these pedagogical tasks to serve as accommodating assessment, and I categorize them this way. And think about some of the limitations. Well, as I already mentioned that, we want to integrate digital literacy and critical reflection tasks probably in all types of tasks. And we need to address the TWILT, the transparency framework, talking about articulate specific course learning outcomes, which some of them included in their ideas, some of them didn't. We need to give students clear evaluation criteria and tell them what is expected out of them, the format, the media they need to present, due dates, and the steps that they need to go through to accomplish them. Okay, so those are the accommodating assignment. Now I want to maybe spend about 10 minutes to talk about how 101 Ideas, this publication, is connected to grand challenges. As Karen said, I am the team implementation team lead for the Rapid Pedagogy Group. Our goal is to increase the use of assessment to get rapid and equitable improvements in learning. Our team carry out 5 projects, but all 5 projects address essential topics. We want to understand how instructors use formative assessment and the factors for change. Read our goal is about using assessment to guide improvement. That it talks about the change, action of change. So then what are the individual program institutional factors that allow change to happen? What are the technology, structure, policy, or resources and support should be there to allow change to happen? And what are the equity issues that we should address? So what is underlining is what I identified from these 100 ideas to answer. So let's take a look at them briefly. In terms of formative assessment strategies, for conceptual at more like very factual level, we can have ChatGPT to generate multiple choice questions or generate exam questions. And we can actually invite students to co-construct the questions with us with the support of ChatGPT. And you can make it fun, like organizing a format, a quiz format, like a TV quiz master format, where students compete and they press the button to answer the question and so on. Students can analyzing their strengths and needs, and they can self-test on the knowledge and have a revision plan generated by ChatGPT. ChatGPT can solve exam questions, and then students can look at their responses versus ChatGPT's responses to see, to check their learning or critique ChatGPT's responses. ChatGPT can generate cases. So if you use case study as accommodating assignment, you would want to use case studies as formative assessment along the way, so students in the end know how to do that. With ChatGPT's help, you can generate case studies and scenarios rather quickly. So that helps with formative assessment. Allow students to document the journal of the process of using ChatGPT. How do they feel? What they have been found useful? What they have surprised them? The limitations they found out, and so on and so forth. So address writing or any discipline that utilize ChatGPT. I highly encourage you to use this strategy. Then AI can provide feedback to students' writing or products. Then students can evaluate the quality of the feedback, or the part of the feedback that they should use and the part of the feedback they think it's not quite relevant to them. ChatGPT can provide creative feedback in the form of poem, picture, like I explained about the eagle flying in the sky, right? In many ways. Here, now addressing second grand challenges, essential topics about technologies. So here are some of the technology tools that emerged. As you can see, here is the some of the tools emerged here. And image tools, I want to see which one I want to mention particularly. Luca, this tool is a particularly being used for designing just logo. This is a image branding AI tool, which is, if you're a marketing company, is probably very useful for you. There's some others. This one I'll explain later. GeoGebra, that is a math tool, AI-based math tool. And there's a paraphrasing tool called Quillbot. Speechify, which turns reading into audio. So you can have students create a podcast. If students do not want to read it themselves, they can have ChatGPT to read, they can have Speechify to read it to them. And then there's an audio mastering tool that you can edit the quality of audios and insert AI generated music and so on and so forth. I'm not going to go over these tools, but I have the links. I will later share the PowerPoint with the organizer and you can try them out later. The next topic that I want to quickly address is how to use the AI tools for advancing equity in teaching and assessment. Here I have very concrete examples for you. We can direct students' attention to critically analyze bias, influence, and stereotypes. I already gave you that example. We can allow students' voice, choice, and creativity better. Because sometimes if you allow students voice and choice, they still don't know what to think. They just want you to tell them what to do. But with ChatGPT, it's much easier for students to be able to think and create what they want. Provide personalized learning opportunities based on their own analysis of their needs and strengths. Provide multiple means and methods of learning input. This is based on universal learning design principle. And then students can be involved in co-construction of assessment tools so that they understand what they're being tested on. This is part of the equity-minded assessment principle. And students can be allowed alternative ways to demonstrate learning, another equity-minded assessment principle. I think I already talked about student involvement. So I'm going to give you 4 examples to talk about these 4 principles that I have not covered earlier. Allowing students voice and choice. So this example is for students to create an image using AI tools that reflect daily life and education during the porfirial era for Mexicans in terms of daily life, their daily life. So in this case, students can quickly generate so they don't have to be worried about copyright infringe if they paid or use the service that allow them to use the AI generated images. And they can research on the content and publish on the Padlet. Right, examples like this just is abundance. You can have students to think about their what they want to choose, their project ideas like that. Video game, right? Students can choose their own video game ideas and so on and so forth. Personalized learning, I highly like this example. This is a counseling students generate case studies to meet their particular learning needs. So students use AI to generate case studies that explicitly focus on the topics, issues that they are currently finding difficult. And then they individually solve those cases. So for example, in this example, you don't have to read it. The first paragraph is what a case study look like. That's what the students input to the ChatGPT. Then in the third paragraph, students ask ChatGPT to create another case study in this format that is addressing low mood. And the counselor is experiencing transference, meaning students is experiencing as what the patient is experiencing. That's my interpretation. And then the students think that she may have trouble, maybe this is something she need to practice more on. Therefore, here is a case, and then this is a case ChatGPT generated for students to practice her clinical formulation skills. This amazing experience where how the learning can be adapted to students' needs. Multiple means of formats of learning. In this example, we have the author transform the academic journals and book chapters into comic books. Really fun. And then feedback can be given in creative formats like a poem or art. And the students can explain the teacher can explain the concept using visual metaphors. like philosophical concepts or abstract concepts. Alternative ways for students to demonstrate learning. So for this author identified some students don't like their face to be shown, like what I'm showing doing my presentation right now. If I don't like my face to be shown, I could use an animated character that is lip synced with my lips based on the tone and words I say, and create an animation behind their oral presentation, right? So it's still, students can still demonstrate their competency and knowledge and skills, but it's just do it another way. This is just awesome. Okay, so here are some examples about concrete examples. There's many examples, but here I just picked out several concrete ways to do so. Last, I want to talk about, maybe I'll talk about, give you some resources later, but then in grand challenges, we are looking for individual factors that allow change to happen, allow them to use assessment for make improvement. But then let's see in these 101 ideas, these people are making changes in their pedagogy already. What happened? What happens to them? What are their individual characters? I identify those individuals. They're willing to experiment. They're open to new technology. Some of them, they write personal logs of, I did this. This is the responses. This is my analysis. Then I did this, and so on and so forth. So quite a few of the instructors provide their personal journey of using ChatGPT. They serve as guide on the side rather than a sage on the stage. They are co-learner as students in this journey of using ChatGPT. They are not afraid of, like new discoveries. They're discovering things together with their students, and they're open to students' feedback and willing to work through failures, especially those text to image tools. They just not always work. You have to run through 20 ramifications for it to generate the image that you want. They engage in self-reflection and continuous learning, and they instill critical reflection skills in their students. A lot of them, they had their pedagogical ideas based on what they have read and studied of others. And they have a clear sense of learning outcomes and intentionally design the activities to align with the outcomes. So those are the individual factors I identified for these faculty members to make the pedagogical changes in their course with this new technology. Many useful resources came out. I highly recommend this one. How to engage students with journal articles. It actually gives students way to write prompts. So what prompt do you use to do these functions, and so on and so forth. This is something you may share with your students as a resource. This is great. And this is Education Padlet, which a lot of educators' ideas have been there, like hundreds. So if you're interested, you can read those. If you're interested in this topic, consider joining us to contribute to grand challenges. We have other 4 teams. So I'm with Jarek on this team in studying AI, but there's other 4 teams. If you're interested, fill out Karen's form or contact me directly. With that, here's a summary. We talked about assessment, equity, and resources. And I think I apologize for not leaving much time for questions, but I'm open for questions now.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentations. Any final comments? We only have 2 minutes. Jarek, any final comments?
Oh yes, we have plenty. I don't know if we have I don't know if we have time to address those. I think that the biggest issue that we see here is this adaptability and usability of the tools, and what is the purpose of what it is that we are doing. It's sort of like, reminds me of this discussion when COVID hit and all of a sudden we had to move everything online, and a lot of faculty were very, very concerned with the fact that they just could not do things like they used to anymore without having access to a classroom stuff with test proctors, for example, right, or lecture hall. 2-3 years after COVID, we have figured out a number of things, getting over the frustrations, and I think that's pretty much what is happening with our ChatGPT discussions. So we are not pretending to be having any ready to go answers. This is just really a forum for us to discuss those issues rather than mandate or even issue guidelines. It's just an attempt to have a conversation. So I'm just very grateful for the speakers and the grand challenges indeed. The title cannot be expressed any better. That's exactly what it is. We just have a number of challenges that need to be discussed and eventually overcome. So again, I don't know if I have any more questions or comments. So Karen is raising her hand. Please go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in on the whole, how do we get students to use ChatGPT to improve rather than use it to do their work? And I have like two thoughts. One was that question about criticism and how ChatGPT can help make people open to criticism. And the second has to do with this writing piece. And I think they're interrelated. I think in general, we're more open to criticism when we can ask for it and get it. Right. So if we can submit something to ChatGPT in the privacy of our bedroom at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it tells us, think about improving this, that hurts our ego less than the red pen coming out from the instructor. And so I think that's true for faculty and for students also. So I think that's the first piece. They're really teaching students to use it as a tool and to ask it to criticize them as opposed to asking it to do their work. But then the flip side of that is we all love to criticize. And I know that my own writing abilities improved dramatically as I had to start teaching students how to write, which was not something I was trained to do, because all of a sudden I was reading thousands of pages of bad student writing and having to say what was wrong with it. And that made me make explicit things that had only been previously implicit in my own understanding. So I think getting students to engage in critique of ChatGPT, and in particular, ChatGPT is very bad at humor. And so if you play around with ChatGPT as a writing instructor and find places where ChatGPT is poor, and then get your students to look at that and critique it. And then the last thought is students resort to cheating when they're overwhelmed and they feel that they can't meet a standard. And the more you engage students in very small writing exercises that are supported by ChatGPT, write a sentence that describes this, ask ChatGPT, rewrite it as a joke, criticize what's wrong with it as a joke, now ask it to rephrase it this way. So that kind of interactive back and forth around a very small task, that's where you're much more likely to engage students in that creative process because it isn't overwhelming to them. And sorry, I know that I talked over our thing, but it's been boiling away in me. So thank you all for coming today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Karen, thank you. Joa, thank you. And the coaches, Jarek and Amanda, thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you all. I'm going to start the recording.